Hi all, hope all is well. It's Mick Farmer from Oztech Drones, and on today's video I'm going to be demonstrating how to clean the terminals in a P100 or a V40 battery. Now, on the odd occasion you may see a warning come up while operating the drone suggesting that the positive terminal is overheating or the negative terminal is overheating. If you've ever come across any of these warnings before, then this is the fix that you'll be chasing. Basically, I'll go through the process of showing you how to pull apart the battery and then the procedure in actually cleaning up the terminals themselves. Once you've cleaned up the terminals themselves, you'll get a decent connection between the battery itself and the drone, and once you're getting that decent connection returned, you shouldn't have any of the warnings showing up and you should be safe to continue operations as per usual. Now, the procedure for breaking down a battery to clean the terminals isn't an overly complicated one. However, I'll be sure not to leave any details out, and remember that while you're doing it for yourself, it helps to take photographs of what you're doing. We also like to video everything we do as well, just to double check our work, so that if we get stuck while we're putting the battery back together or the drone back together, we can always go back through the video footage and see exactly how we pulled it apart. Now, to get this process underway, you will need some tools. They're basic tools, of course. One is a drill. You'll need a wire brush that will fit into the drill itself. You will also need your XAG tools that's provided by the manufacturer. You will need a variety of them as well, because there's different variety of screws used to actually assemble the battery. You will need some needle nose pliers, and you'll also need a vise to work with as well. If you're working out in the field and you're trying to do this repair out in the field, it's important to have either a spare set of hands available with some vise grips, or a vise on the back of the vehicle to actually get this procedure done. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do is go ahead and take the rubbers off the corner of the battery. It's a matter of actually popping those corner molds off. As you can see there, these ones have already started taking off. So just go ahead and remove all four. And once the rubbers have been removed from the corners, now we can get access to the bolts that are actually inside the battery housing themselves. There's 4 bolts to be removed, 1, 2, 3, and 4. They are quite difficult to see on camera, of course, but they are down in there. Now, to remove the bolts in the battery housing themselves, this is the tool that we're using. It's the 2.5, and it's just a matter of actually sliding it in there and turning it around until it catches on the bolt head. As you can see there, it's caught, and then it's just a matter of undoing it. And repeat that for all 4 bolts. Now, it is important to have the right tool to do this job. If you're using something that's too small, or another set of tools, say an Imperial set, that's not actually suited to the task, what you can find is you'll strip that bolt head out. If you happen to strip the bolt head out, it can be quite difficult to get them out. So it's advisable to use the tools that XAG provides. And these are the bolts themselves. As you can see, they're only very small. It's a good idea to keep all the gear together so you don't misplace anything. Now, if for any reason you get stuck and you can't actually get the bolt out because there is dirt or moisture that's been in the head of the bolt, having a pick on hand is definitely a good tool as well. It's just a matter of picking the dirt out of the top of the bolt head, and then you can actually get access to it with the 2.5mm tool. Okay, so now that all 4 bolts have been removed, you should be left with this gear here. So it's the 4 rubbers and the 4 bolts themselves. And now the head of the battery is free to be removed. Now, to remove the head of the battery itself, just a matter of turning it around to face you. So the terminals are actually facing you, and it's just a matter of kicking the head back, lifting it off, and once you've lifted off, it exposes all the connections beneath. You've got your positive connection, your negative connection, and all your communication cables there as well. Now, of course, while you're doing this, you do not want to arc the positive out with the negative. Just like a car battery, you don't want to make a physical connection between the two. It will generate sparks and heat and could possibly destroy the battery control system as well. Now, for the purposes of what we're trying to achieve, we're actually trying to remove the terminals themselves here. So to remove those terminals, there's a couple of connections that we do need to undo. One is this positive connection here that leads back to the positive connection, and the other is this communications cable here. The negative itself can stay exactly where it is. We don't need to touch it for the time being, but we do need to disconnect this communications cable and that positive connection there. Now, to remove that positive connection, we're going to need the XAG tool labeled H3, which is this one here. And it's just a matter of inserting it and undoing it like so. Now, the next connection that we need to undo is this communications cable here. So it's just a matter of taking it out of the cable holder itself and then disconnecting it by pressing down on the top here and actually removing it like so. Now, you're also going to want to remove the zip tie that's holding down the positive terminal. Just a matter of cutting that off. Okay, so now we have our positive connection completely removed from the battery itself. It's free to move about, and our communication's also been disconnected. The next connection that we need to undo is this connection right here. We need to separate that from the battery housing itself. Once that's done, then we're free to remove the terminals. Now, to remove that connection, you will need a 4mm Allen key. And unfortunately, it's not one of the tools that XAG provides, so you will need another set of Allen keys on hand as well. So just go ahead and undo that one as well, like so. Okay, so once that's undone, you'll see that there's 3 freestanding connections. One is the one that we just undone, the other is the positive connection, and the other is the communications cable that we undone earlier. Now that they're disconnected, we can go ahead and start removing the bolts in the actual terminal housing itself. So you can see 1, 2, 3, and there's another one inside there as well. Now, to remove the terminal housing bolts, you'll need the H2.5. You can see here I've gone ahead and undone those 4 bolts. So there's the 1, 2, and then there's 2 inside there as well. Once they're undone, it's just a matter of actually removing that terminal. It'll come straight out in one piece, such as this here. Now, at this point here, I like to try and keep all my gear manageable. So it's a good idea just to remove the bolts completely from the actual terminal head itself. Just put them to one side with the rest of your gear there. Once that's done, we're right to proceed to the next stage, which is actually removing the back plate from the terminal. You'll see there's 4 smaller bolts, 1, 2, and 3, and 4 up in there. They will all need to be removed as well, and then we can go ahead and start removing the terminals. Now, to remove these 4 bolts here, you'll actually need a 1.5mm Allen key. So just go ahead and loosen those 4 bolts off. Once all 4 bolts have been loosened completely off, you'll be right to actually go ahead and separate the housing from the terminals themselves. Now, the terminal itself should just lift straight out like so. And if you needed to get it back in, you can see exactly how it fits back into position there, just like a puzzle piece. But for this purpose, we want to remove it, so you just remove it like so. And what you'll be left with now is actually the housing. We do not need to disassemble that any further. That's exactly how we'll leave it be. And at this point, that's what we're left with. Now, purely for management purposes, I like to actually go ahead and just completely remove the bolts from the terminals themselves, and then just go ahead and put them to one side. That way they're ready for us when we go to put the battery back together again at a later point. All right, so at this point here, it's just a matter of flipping that terminal over. And when you flip it over, you can actually see the contact points for the batteries themselves. So if you have a look up inside there, you can see those teeth up in there and the teeth over this side as well. They're actually the contact points for the battery. So it's the contact point between the battery and the drone, and it's vitally important that they remain as clean as possible to give you a secure connection between the battery and the drone itself. A lot of the times, if you're experiencing the negative terminal overheating warning or the positive terminal overheating warning, it's purely because there is excessive corrosion in these plates here. So if you zoom in here, you can actually see how they're tainted a little bit green. that's an indication that there could possibly be some corrosion on those plates. It's just a matter of undoing these bolts here. There's one set there for that set of plates, and there's one bolt here as well for this set of plates. It's a matter of actually just doing them one at a time and disconnecting that cable, and then using the needle nose pliers to remove these plates. Now this bolt here at the top of the actual connection plates we'll be removing using the H3 tool provided by XAG. Now once that bolt's removed, it's just a matter of actually going ahead and lifting that connection off, like so. And this is why I like to do them one at a time. It's just so you don't get your gear mixed up. Just keep your negative connected for the time being, and let's just concentrate on doing the positive connection first. And now that that positive connection has actually been removed, the cable itself has been removed, we will need to put this into a vise to actually pull these plates from the housing itself. Now, as you can see here, I've gone ahead and put the battery terminal into a vise. You only need to do it up firmly. It just needs to secure it, so you can go ahead and use the needle nose pliers to lever these plates from the housing of the battery itself. There are a couple of connections here as well, so there's a couple of sensors either side that need to be put back in the appropriate order, so keep track of that, which is why it's always a good idea to photograph this process as you're doing it. That way you can keep track of what you've done and where everything goes back when you're reassembling the battery. Now this next bit's a little bit hard to actually film and complete at the same time, considering I've only got one set of hands. So what I'm going to do now is actually I've just removed those two cables there, the two sensors, just get them out of the road of the actual plates themselves, and now I'll use those needle nose pliers to actually lever them out. You can see here I've nearly got them out, so it's just a matter of wiggling it backwards and forwards until they come out, like so, and they'll just lift out. Now once you have the plates removed from the housing of the battery itself, it's a really good idea to actually familiarise yourself with the way the plates are laid out. As you can see, there's 3 separate components. It's actually 6 pieces though. So there's a left-hand piece, which is this one over here. There's a center piece, as you can see in the middle there, and there's also a right-hand piece, and they will separate. So for example, the right-hand piece just fell off there. The center one as well can be taken apart, and the right-hand one. Now these two here, they're actually identical, so you can use a left for a right and a right for a left, for example, but you cannot mix the center ones up. The center ones are straight, the left and the right actually have a bend in them. You want to do your best not to bend them in any particular direction. Try and keep the same form that they come out of the battery. The form is quite important because it's the form that creates the tension on the connection itself, and if you lose the tension of the connection itself, you will create resistance, and resistance creates heat. Heat will create the warnings that you're seeing on the controller. Now you can also see here as well, yes, there's 1, 2, 3, the 3 components to it, but it is 6 pieces, so they break apart into individual units as well, like so. And it is these units that we're going to want to clean. So you can see here there's obviously been quite a bit of heat run through these batteries over the time that we've used it. It has done some intensive work, so it's not surprising that we're seeing evidence of heat and corrosion on these terminals. So the next step will involve just breaking them apart. Make sure that you've got your 6 pieces, and then cleaning these using the wire brush with the drill. It's a matter of holding onto the plates themselves with the needle nose pliers, and then cleaning them using the wire brush on the drill itself. As you can see here, this is one that I've just brushed. You can see that I've removed that corrosion off, and you can see that it's nice and polished and clean, ready to go. You can do the same with the other end as well. And the rest remains a pretty straightforward process. Just basically rinse and repeat. Make sure that all of the connections are clean, and then go ahead and reassemble them and put them back into the battery itself. So you can see here that I've gone ahead and I've brushed all of them. You can see that I've brushed both ends of them as well, so the tops up here and definitely the bottoms, of course. So you just want to make sure that they're nice and clean. Once they're all been brushed up and they're clean, they're ready to go back together. It's just a matter of keeping them in order, of course, because the centers, you don't want to put the centers back in like that, for example. They need to be put back in the same way that they came out. They need to go back in that form there. So they need to be acting like a fork, as you can see there. These two side ones here as well, they're the same as well. So you can see there, they're going together in a forked fashion like that. And that's what creates the tension between the actual battery connector and the drone itself. If you go, for example, putting them in that way, of course, that's not going to work. So they do go together in one way and one way only. The one there, and then these ones here, of course, you can see there, they go back together like so. Now, it is also worth mentioning that at times you may be getting a loose connection. So that's because the prongs here, or at the fork here, are loosened off and they need to be tensioned. And the way you tension them is you can put a slight bend in this point here. So just where my fingernail is there, you can actually create a bit of a tension there so that you close the gap up between that there. So that prong there will actually be a bit tighter. So when it actually slides over the terminal on the drone itself, it's a more secure fit. It's definitely something worthwhile doing while it's pulled apart. We can slightly reshape them. You don't want to go overboard with it though, of course. So it's just a matter of closing that distance up on those prongs there. Now this one here, you can see that I've actually gone ahead there and closed that gap up so that the prongs are actually touching. This will ensure you've got a secure connection between the battery and the drone itself. For comparison, I'll show you an older one. This one here, that's an old one. So you can see there that there's a gap at the end of that prong, and that can lead to a loose connection, which can lead to resistance and heat as well, which can throw the warning up on your controller. So it's a good idea to try and close that gap up as much as possible. You just have to be cautious how you go about it, of course. You don't want to bend them in the wrong direction. Just ensure that it's a nice snug fit, like so. Now to put the slight bend in the prongs themselves, I've just been using the needle nose pliers on it and then just applying a little bit of pressure on it. You don't want to put too much on there because it's very soft material and it's easily distorted. You only need to move it ever so slightly, and if you get it right, you'll see the results, quite a snug fit. For example, you can see here, this one here, you can see that gap there, pretty obvious. This is the before shot, and this is the after shot. So you can see that that distance is closed right up. And that there's a completed unit, ready to go back into the battery. And now to put them back into the battery housing, it's just a matter of putting them back into the position that they were in previously, very similar to the other side there, and then obviously pushing it down. You will need to apply a little bit of force to get them back home, but once you've done that, they should be set in the right position, and then we're right to put our cables back on. You can see here, just using a rubber mallet or a plastic mallet, you can actually just tap them back home, just like so. You can see there that I've driven it all the way back into position, and then it's just a matter of getting our sensors back into the right spots as well. So one sensor goes on that side, and then this sensor here actually goes on that side of the connection there once we put the bolt back in. Now getting this bolt back in here, this one here, it can be a little bit tricky, but if you just spend the time to get it in the right position, you'll find that it goes straight in. It's just a matter of tightening that up to make sure it's a secure connection. At the moment, of course, it's only on there loosely, but once you get a secure connection, we're right to move on to the negative terminal. So you can see there, if you have a look up inside there, you can see those prongs. That's a perfect example of how you want it to look when you're done. If you have a look over here at these previous ones, they're obviously darkened a bit more, they've got a bit more corrosion on it and evidence of heating, whereas they're nice and clean. You can actually see the copper underneath there as well. So now the next step, once that's actually secured again, that bolt, is to move on to the negative terminal. So once again, it's just a matter of removing that bolt and then taking that wire off like so. can actually see here, this is a good example, is the nut for it is actually built into the wire itself, which is how it secures when you actually tighten that bolt. And that there's just an example of the wire with the bolt back in, so you get an idea of how it actually works. Now, as you can see, I've gone ahead and cleaned up that negative plates, the negative connector pins, this one here. You can have a look up in there, you can see how clean they are. That's exactly how you want them to be. Now, the last thing you want to do before you go and install it back into the battery is just double check to make sure that all your connections are tight. Make sure that your sensors are back down beside the negative terminals and the positive terminals. These are the sensors here. Once that's done, it's good to go back into the battery. Okay, so now that all the pins have been cleaned, as you can see there, it's just a matter of actually fitting it back into the housing, just like a jigsaw puzzle, as I said earlier, and then tightening these 4 screws up. So these are the very small screws, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Once that's done, the actual terminal itself will be right to be installed straight back into the drone. And to get started with that, it's just a matter of actually positioning the terminal back into there and then putting the screws. There's another 4 screws to go into these positions here. And the screws that you're looking for to connect the terminal to the battery itself are the shorter ones. The longer ones are the ones that go beneath the rubbers. And they don't need to be over tight, just to firm them up and double check it. And then as you can see there, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the terminal is now secure. Now the next thing you want to do is go ahead and reconnect the communications cable. It's just a matter of connecting those 2 together, just by pushing them in and then putting that back into the housing here. Clip that back in. The next one will be the positive cable here, so that's this cable here. It needs to actually go back onto the positive terminal here. Like so. And yeah, it may spark, but don't panic. Just tighten that up firmly. We'll double check all this before we're through. And the last one we need to do, which is with the 4mm, and it's for the negative cable up into the circuit board here. Once again, just do it up nice and firm, like so. And now that we have all of them connected, we'll just double check their work. So nice and firm, that's good. Let's double check this one. It's firm. Double check our communications cable and double check our negative up in there, which is the 4mm back up in here. And once that's done, it's just a matter of making sure it's all tucked up and sliding the housing back over the top of the battery. We can test it now as well. So just by pressing that there, you can see that the battery is activated. That's always a positive sign. The next thing we need to do is install the battery, the bolts to secure the head of the battery to the battery itself, which are the longer ones. Just a matter of dropping them in. We're using the 2.5 to secure them, just as we did at the start. You'll see as you're tightening it, it'll close that gap up there. Again, we just want a firm connection, firm tension. So there's that one there. And there. That one there. So again, just double check to make sure they're firm. so. Last thing we do is put our rubbers back in. They just clip back in like so. And it is important to put these back in because it will keep the dirt from the top of the bolt heads. The dirt and the moisture. You don't want corrosion in there, otherwise you'll never get them out. And that's it. A working battery. Good to go.